Have you ever wondered how a single decision, one impulsive step into danger, could change your entire life? That's exactly what happened to a man named Daniel Cross, a single father just trying to keep his son safe, when fate threw him into the path of someone who carried a patch feared by many but respected by those who understood its meaning. The night it all began was quiet, almost too quiet. Daniel was driving home from a late shift at the hardware store. His old pickup rattled along the back roads of rural Montana, headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the fog. His son Liam was at home with a neighbor, waiting for him to return. Daniel was bone-tired, his hands stiff from unloading lumber all day, but he still felt a measure of peace in that silence, at least until he heard it. The sound came sharp and brutal, like metal screaming, tires skidding, the crack of glass, and finally a sickening boom. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs as he rounded a bend and spotted the wreck. A silver sedan was crumpled against an oak tree, its hood twisted like foil. Smoke poured upward, glowing faintly orange in the dark from sparks hidden beneath the crushed frame. Without thinking, Daniel slammed his truck into park. His boots pounded the asphalt as he ran toward the wreck, adrenaline overriding the fear that maybe the car would blow. Inside, through the spider-webbed windshield, he saw a man slumped over the wheel, unmoving. "Hang on!" Daniel yelled, more to himself than the stranger. He yanked on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Years of working odd jobs, of hauling and lifting, to keep food on the table, gave his arms the strength to force it open with a guttural grunt. Heat smacked him in the face as the airbag deflated, acrid and choking. The driver stirred, groaning, blood dripping from his temple. Daniel fumbled for the seatbelt latch, finally jamming his pocket knife into the nylon and slicing through it. "Come on, man, don't quit on me," Daniel urged, hooking his arms under the man's shoulders. He dragged him free just as a hiss of leaking fuel reached his ears. They collapsed in the gravel shoulder. Daniel's lungs burned as he coughed, cradling the stranger's weight. Behind them, the sedan erupted with a thunderous whoosh, flames curling into the night sky. If Daniel had been a minute slower, they both would have been nothing but ashes. The stranger's eyes flickered open, blue, piercing even through the haze of blood and soot. His voice was raspy, strained. "You pulled me out." Daniel nodded, still catching his breath. "Name's Daniel. Don't talk. Ambulance is on the way." The man coughed, trying to sit up. "Hawk," he muttered. "They call me Hawk." Daniel reached back toward the wreck, spotting a heavy leather jacket lying in the dirt, half scorched. He snatched it up before the fire consumed it. That's when he saw it, the unmistakable wing skull patch, bright even through the soot. Hell's Angels. Daniel froze. Every headline he'd ever read, every rumor about violence and vengeance, flooded his mind. Yet here was Hawk, broken, bloodied, and smiling faintly at him. "Guess I owe you one, brother," Hawk whispered before slipping back into unconsciousness. Moments later, sirens wailed in the distance. Paramedics swept in, lifting Hawk onto a stretcher. One of them asked Daniel, "Are you family?" Daniel hesitated. "No," he said, but the word felt strange, because somehow in the space of minutes, saving this man felt heavier than just a good deed. As they loaded Hawk into the ambulance, the biker caught Daniel's eye, forcing a grin despite the pain. "Stay by your phone," he rasped before the doors shut. Daniel stood alone as the flashing lights disappeared down the road, the wreck smoldering behind him. Driving home, his chest tightened with unease. He told himself it was just another moment of doing the right thing, wrong place, right time. But something about Hawk's words stuck like a burr under his skin. Later that night, Daniel sat at the kitchen table nursing lukewarm coffee while Liam scribbled math homework. He said nothing about the wreck, not to an 8-year-old boy who already carried the weight of missing a mother. But when Daniel's phone buzzed at 9 p.m., his pulse jumped. The message was short. "Appreciate what you did. Meet me tomorrow, noon. Iron Horse Diner." No name, no number. Just instructions. Daniel stared at the screen. He wasn't a man who invited trouble, but this didn't feel like a request. Something told him Hawk wasn't the type of man you ignored. "Everything okay, Dad?" Liam asked, peeking up from his notebook. Daniel forced a smile. Yeah, buddy. Just someone saying thanks. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just thanks. It was the beginning of something else. Something far bigger than himself. And part of him was terrified to find out what. Have you ever sat down across from someone and instantly felt like the ground under your feet was shifting? Like the life you thought you knew was being quietly rewritten? That's exactly what happened to Daniel Cross the following day at noon, inside the chrome-trimmed Iron Horse diner. The morning had been restless. Daniel barely slept, tossing and turning, replaying the wreck. Hawk's faint grin, the patch. Every instinct screamed to stay home, to ignore the cryptic text. But something in Hawk's voice, weak yet commanding, clung to him. It wasn't a request. It was an invitation. Or maybe a summons. By 11:55, Daniel's old truck rattled into the diner parking lot. Chrome bikes lined the curb, their polished tanks gleaming like black glass in the sunlight. He could hear the faint ticking of cooling engines. His gut tightened. He almost turned the key and drove off. Almost. But then he thought of Liam, his boy looking up at him, always watching how his dad handled the world. Daniel swallowed hard, stepped out, and walked toward the door. The diner smelled of frying bacon and hot coffee. Conversations hushed the moment he stepped inside. At the back corner booth, Hawk sat upright, his head bandaged but his posture strong. Beside him were two men in leather, the same winged skull stitched across their backs. Their gazes pinned Daniel like nails. Hawk's expression softened into a grin. He raised a hand. Cross! You came. Daniel slid into the booth. The leather squeaked under his weight. His palms were slick with sweat, so he wrapped them around the mug the waitress placed in front of him, something to anchor him. These are my brothers, Hawk said, gesturing. Diesel. Cutter. The two men nodded, silent, their eyes sharp as blades. You saved my life, Hawk continued. His voice carried an edge that made the statement feel like more than gratitude. And in our world, that means something. Daniel cleared his throat. I didn't do it for thanks. Diesel leaned forward, his voice gravel low. Good. 'Cause in our world, it means you're part of the circle now. Whether you like it or not, the words hit Daniel like a hammer. Part of the circle? He didn't even know what that meant. He wanted to say no thanks, to walk away. But Cutter's eyes, steady, unblinking, warned him that this wasn't a door you closed after stepping through. Hawk smirked, wincing slightly from his bandages. You didn't just pull me from a wreck, Cross. You stepped in when most would have kept driving. That's something we don't forget, Daniel shifted uneasily. Look, I'm just a guy raising his son. I don't want any trouble, Cutter finally spoke, his voice calm but heavy. Trouble has a way of finding everyone. Question is, who shows up when it does? The words lingered. Daniel thought of every time he'd been alone since Liam's mother left. No backup, no one to call at 2 a.m. when the water heater burst or when Liam spiked a fever. It had always been him against the storm, and here were these men feared by the world, offering something. The waitress dropped off their meals, plates of eggs, hash browns, and bacon that filled the air with grease and salt. Daniel took a sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding him. Hawk reached into his jacket and slid a card across the table. Thick, white, heavy stock. A single number written in bold black ink. One call. Anytime, Hawk said. Doesn't matter what it is. You call, we come. Daniel hesitated but took the card, slipping it into his wallet. He told himself he'd never use it, that it was just a polite gesture. But deep down, something told him it was a promise sealed in blood. The meeting ended abruptly. Hawk extended his hand and Daniel shook it. Firm, deliberate, like binding a deal he didn't fully understand. Diesel and Cutter followed him outside, where the three bikers mounted their machines. The engines roared to life, rattling the windows of the diner. Daniel stood in the doorway, coffee still burning in his gut, watching them ride off. Back home, Liam was on the living room floor, building a Lego tower. You were gone a long time, he said. Daniel forced a faint smile. Just met some people, buddy. But that night, as he lay in bed, the growl of those engines replayed in his head. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the sense that a door had opened into another world, and without realizing it, he'd stepped through. 3 days later, Daniel was hauling groceries to his truck in a cold drizzle when he heard raised voices in the parking lot. Two men had cornered an elderly cashier, accusing her of scratching their car. She looked terrified, clutching her purse like a shield. Daniel didn't know her well, but she'd always slipped Liam extra candy at checkout. He stepped in. "Hey, let's all take a breath." One of the men shoved him. Daniel stumbled, his grip tightening on the grocery bags. Something inside him shifted. Almost without thinking, he pulled out his wallet and felt the edge of the card. He dialed. The line picked up on the first ring. "Hawk," came the voice on the other end. "Where are you?" 10 minutes later, the deep rumble of motorcycles rolled into the lot. 6 riders coasted in, leather jackets slick from rain. Hawk swung off his bike, boots splashing in the puddles. His presence was calm, yet carried a weight that froze the two aggressors where they stood. "Everything all right here?" Hawk asked, his tone measured but dangerous. The men stammered excuses, retreating quickly. The cashier's hand trembled as she gripped Daniel's arm. "I don't know who they are, but thank you." Hawk clapped Daniel on the shoulder. "Told you, you're part of the circle now." Diesel handed Daniel a plastic bag. "Groceries," he said simply. Inside were not only replacements for what Daniel had dropped, but extras: bread, meat, fruit. Daniel blinked. "I didn't." "We look after our own," Hawk interrupted. The riders mounted up, engines growling like thunder, and vanished into the rain as quickly as they'd arrived. Driving home, Daniel glanced at the bag on the seat beside him. The line between his life and theirs was already blurring, and deep down, part of him didn't mind. Because for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt like he wasn't alone. Have you ever done something so small that you thought it ended the moment you walked away, only to realize later it had set off a chain of events that would ripple through your entire life? That was the truth Daniel Cross came to understand in the weeks after he pulled Hawk from that wreck. It started subtly. A few quiet check-ins, a low rumble of bikes coasting down his street, Hawk's unmistakable figure leaning on the fence as Daniel fixed Liam's bike. At first, Daniel thought it was coincidence, but he was learning fast. With Hawk's circle, nothing was coincidence. One Saturday, Daniel and Liam went to the park. Parents had gathered for a fundraiser to support the kids' league, trying to scrape together enough for uniforms. Daniel contributed what little he could, embarrassed by how small the bill felt in the donation box. Then he saw them, Hawk, Diesel, and Cutter, striding across the grass in heavy jackets. People stiffened, whispers rippled, but Hawk ignored it all, walked straight to the organizer, and handed her a thick envelope. "From the club," he said simply. The woman's jaw dropped. She stammered, This is enough to cover the whole season." Hawk shrugged as if it meant nothing. Cutter clapped Daniel on the back. "For the kids," he muttered. Daniel watched in awe. No speeches, no demands for recognition, just quiet generosity. He realized then that what the world saw as menace, these men wielded as protection and loyalty, and now somehow that code included him. Weeks blurred together. Hawk called once to ask Daniel's help moving boxes at a warehouse. Daniel had hesitated, imagining guns or contraband, but when he arrived, the place was stacked high with crates of winter coats and food. "Community Center lost its funding," Hawk explained. "We're making sure kids don't freeze this winter." For hours, Daniel lifted alongside men twice his size, each working with quiet efficiency. By the end, his arms ached, but his chest felt lighter than it had in years. Hawk clapped him on the back. "Told you, the circle's about more than protection." Daniel went home that night, looked at Liam, and thought, maybe this is what family feels like when it finds you. But it wasn't all easy. One evening, Daniel was closing up at work when a customer stormed in, red-faced and shouting about a mistake on his bill. His threats grew louder, uglier. Daniel tried to stay calm, but the man was on the edge of violence. Then Daniel saw them, two silhouettes through the glass door, Hawk and Diesel, standing like shadows carved from stone. The man took one look at them, his anger evaporating like mist. He muttered something and fled. Hawk smirked. "Guess we returned the favor again." Daniel shook his head, half amused, half in disbelief. "Do you follow me everywhere?" Hawk's grin widened. Sometimes the circle watches even when you don't see it. Later, Daniel sat on the porch while Liam slept inside. He looked at the card still tucked in his wallet. It no longer felt like a lifeline. It felt like a bond. Days turned into months. Daniel and Liam joined the riders on charity runs, delivering toys at Christmas, food at Thanksgiving, and blankets during January's biting cold. Liam perched safely in a van that led the convoy, his eyes wide at the endless sea of rumbling engines behind them. At each stop, children cheered, parents stared in disbelief, and Daniel carried boxes alongside men he once feared. At the final stop, Hawk crouched to Liam's level and handed him a small leather vest stitched with the same discreet emblem Daniel now wore on his jacket. "Now you're both part of it," Hawk said. Liam beamed, slipping it on proudly. Daniel's chest swelled with something he hadn't felt in years, pride that his boy would grow up inside a circle of loyalty larger than either of them. It became clear then. Pulling Hawk from that wreck wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Snow blanketed the town in heavy silence. Daniel explained it to Liam one night as they watched flakes drift beneath the porch light. "It's not about the patch or the bikes," Daniel said. "It's about making sure the people in your life know they can count on you." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "Like how you could count on Hawk that day in the parking lot." "Exactly," Daniel said, ruffling his boy's hair. Liam's grin widened. "Then I want to be like that too." Daniel's throat tightened, because in that moment he realized the circle wasn't just about him. It was shaping the kind of man his son would become. One spring afternoon, there was a knock at Daniel's door. A man stood there, nervous, holding a small gift bag. "You don't know me," he said, "but my son told me you pulled him from a ditch last winter. I wanted to say thank you." Inside the bag was a silver keychain, engraved with two words, "Pay it forward." Daniel turned it over in his hand, the weight familiar. The circle wasn't just the bikers anymore. It was spreading, rippling outward, touching lives he never expected. Later that week, Hawk stopped by. "Heard you've been doing some recruiting," he teased. Daniel laughed. "Guess it's contagious." "That's the point, brother," Hawk said, his grin genuine. "Keep it going. One day you won't even know where the circle ends." Daniel knew then he didn't need to. The important thing was making sure it never broke. On a warm summer evening, Daniel and Liam sat on the porch, crickets chirping, the faint rumble of distant engines rolling through the hills. "Do you think Hawk will come by soon?" Liam asked. Daniel smiled. "Maybe. But even if he doesn't, he's still here." Liam frowned playfully. "How?" Daniel looked out at the fading light. "Every time someone helps without asking for anything back. That's the circle. Every time we step in when it's easier to walk away, that's him." "That's all of them," Liam thought for a long moment, then nodded. "Then I'm going to keep it going, Dad." Daniel put an arm around his son, feeling the weight of promise and pride. He'd thought he was saving a stranger. Instead, he had found a family bound not by blood, but by loyalty. And in a world quick to judge, Daniel learned the truth. Some debts aren't paid in money. They're paid in loyalty, in trust, and in the way you choose to ride through life. The night of the wreck hadn't just saved Hawk. It had saved Daniel, too.